college age students, and now kind of doing this podcast radio show up to 28-year-olds. What are some common themes that you kind of seen as you've been working with this age demographic with people who are developing their faith?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's several things, but in general, we really want to be intentional about talking about things that of course are fun, but also things that are difficult. So anxiety is clearly one of them. Anxiety has risen by massive amounts in the last several years. And then the pandemic just accelerated everything. So like fear, loneliness, worry, which is akin to anxiety. And then I found that, I would talk about suffering sometimes because I've been a chronic pain patient for a long time and suffered physically. And I was like, do young people really like want to talk about this stuff? So I would talk about it every now and then, and I get this huge response to it. And I'm like, oh, people are suffering. They may not be suffering in the ways that I'm suffering, but they are suffering and going through things. So we want to talk about those things and not waste our suffering, not waste our pain. So I want to tackle those kind of things. But I also want to talk about things like dating and, romantic relationships. We're going to talk about biblical sexuality and what that looks like, and how to talk about a subject that really, like, when you enter into those waters, it's like, here we go, but do it in a way that's gentle, humble, in a process of listening with a healthy, like I said, a healthy sense of humor. We're going to talk about things like church involvement, which I mentioned already. I talked to a pastor recently, and he's planning a church in Richmond, Virginia, about why in the world would a young person in college or just post-college want to commit to a local church? Doesn't that sound like kind of stupid? Like, really tackling those things and asking the hard questions and wrestling through them. Talking about, like, what does it mean to be purposeful in learning about apologetics? Like, what does it mean to learn, which is a defense of the Christian faith? Like, what does that look like in today's society? Not necessarily opening up a big, like textbook and going after like the right answers for stuff, but doing it in a way that's gentle and kind, like stuff that there's legit answers to people's hard questions. There are really good answers to really tough questions, like, why does God allow evil and suffering in the world? Why would, if God really cared about me, why did he allow my mother to die? Those are hard questions. Like, those are difficult things. But, like, is Jesus really alive today? That's like a legitimate question. And so tackling those kinds of things that are both like heady but also like emotional and personal. So we'll talk about things like pornography and sex, and we'll talk about things like, I'm trying to think about who my guests, I've already recorded episodes. We'll talk about, let's see, grace. What does grace mean? What does grace really mean? Like, actually mean? Like, we believe in the grace of God, but we don't live that way. Like, barely ever. We don't really ever live in the grace of God. And being intentional. We were talking about race. I'm going to interview a guy, a black pastor in Orlando in a couple of days. And we're just going to talk about, hey, man, what's it been like to be a black pastor for the last 2.5 years, and get into it, like, talk about it, and be authentic with those things. So I want to cover just a wide variety of things that are applicable to young people, because the stuff that quote unquote adults talk about it's applicable to young people. It just needs to be delivered in the way, and the how you talk about stuff is, I'd say, this day and age, even more important than the what. They're certainly equal. Like, the how and the what are equal, but I think even more so today, how you say something is almost more important than what you say. And so we want to do that in a winsome and kind-hearted and also funny and poignant way. Keep people engaged.
That's solid. That's solid.
Yeah, no, I think I'm really grateful. Like, there has
it seems like there's been this trend of people taking on these like hard issues that like I don't want to say like it seems like the church has been shying away from, because I haven't been alive that long, but it does seem like a lot of people are taking on these hard yeah, and like it seems like people are taking on like these hard topics, which I'm grateful for, like with you, Shelby, like taking on like these all of these different things that young people in our generation are really struggling with. I think for one, like I think for sure, definitely suffering is probably one that's a really hard one to kind of just like navigate, because it's like, hey, if God's good, why is he allowing suffering, or why is he allowing like this person to get killed in the streets? Like why are all these different things happening? You know what I mean? I think like even like for my own like personal life, like in events that have happened in this past year, it's like having someone address the concept of suffering in a gracious and loving and biblical way is really important, and just getting answers, and also I think just staying with Jesus, because it seems like, at least in our generation anyway, most of the people our age get their information from TikTok, and it's just like a 6-second 15-second clip that's like, oh, bet this is why this is not true, and it's like that's not a thorough examination of why you shouldn't believe something. So really grateful for you and doing that.
Yeah, and on top of that, just having qualified people to listen to, because like a lot of people listen to a lot of things on the internet, and it's just like they don't trust their local pastors, or they don't trust, like I'll see people online arguing with like really qualified people, like, and I'm like, where did this ever happen? So what I'm saying? It's like it's really good to have good voices in the media,
Yeah, it's like, I saw recently, Tim Keller, a pastor from New York City, planted a church in the early 90s, 30 years of faithful ministry before he even got famous, really, and just in the trenches of doing it. And he's just so wise, so brilliant in so many ways. And he's dying right now of like pancreatic cancer. And he's being gentle and kind, but he's like drawing some pretty hard lines on like social media, and people are trying to dunk on him on Twitter. And like I was like, do you even know who you're talking to, dude? You're like a 22-year-old seminary student who's trying to pick out stuff from Tim Keller. Like, stay in your lane.
Let him know.
Bro, you have to flip that. That was perfect.
I got you. I'm gonna flip it. Honestly, that's like literally one of my pet peeves, I think. And also just like being here in New York City and actually seeing all the stuff that's happening, and seeing Tim Keller talk about certain things that are
talking about race.
Like,
he's talking about like the injustice that's happening in the world. Yes.
And I'm like, yo, y'all are really gonna call this man like, they won't call him a heretic, but they'll borderline be like, yo, we're not going to bang with him anymore because he's talking about these specific issues that actually happen to real life people.
That's literally like last week's discussion, how we were talking about like how there's people really dunking on Eric Mason, Dr. Eric Mason from Dallas Theological Seminary with a doctorate in ministry. And I'm like, bro, like, how does it even make sense? Like, you know what I'm saying?
The internet. Yeah. So that's why I'm trying to make it a better place. So I am trying, but like, they told me initially, they're like, they wanted my podcast, my program, they called it, to be on the radio. And I was like, for 18 to 28-year-olds, I'm like, young people don't listen to the radio. They don't listen to Christian radio. They don't listen to Christian talk radio, and they don't listen to Christian talk radio on the weekends, which is when it would air. So we're making it a podcast, but I'm putting it on the radios for the parents or grandparents